Today I will be talking about a study to see how generational differences affect language development in bilingual children. Hoffman made many interesting points in her articles that inspired this study, one of those points being that parents' English proficiency relates to a child's language skills. So when it comes to non-first generation children, I am assuming their parents already know English, so it'll be interesting to see how that impacts their language development. Another point is that many bilingual children fall behind their monolingual peers in English proficiency, and many of those have one or two foreign born parents. So, in this study, non first generation children have parents that were born in the US, and I'm curious to see if that statistic still holds true. Lastly, the quantity and quality of the languages children hear influences their rates of development in each language. First generation bilingual children are hearing their native language more because they speak it at home rather than English, but for second and third generation bilinguals, they have at least one parent who speaks English, so they are being exposed to both languages, hopefully equally and with the same proficiency. So, this information led me to hypothesize that bilingual children who are not first generation will have greater combined vocabularies and higher English language proficiency levels than first generation bilinguals because they are exposed to both languages simultaneously. So, to test this, there will be 3 different groups, and the parents of each group will be given the LEAP questionnaire to control for the languages being spoken at home. And this tool is super helpful because it's available in multiple languages, so we can use a diverse group of participants. We can also see the quality of the languages the children are exposed to because we get the ages the parents acquired their different languages, how much they use them in their everyday lives, and in return, this tells us how fluent they are and how that's affecting the child's development in that language. And there's also criteria for each generation to help put participants into one of these categories. All the participants will be 5 years old because that's when they're still developing their language, while starting kindergarten will they either be exposed to English or continue speaking it. It's a mix of boys and girls, and a consent form will be given to the parents explaining the procedure since they are consenting on behalf of the children. The experiment will consist of 2 parts. The first part will be the Peabody vocabulary test. Then children from each generational group will take it in English and their other language, and parents will be running this test so that if it's a language that the researcher doesn't speak, well, there's a solution, and so the child feels more comfortable to participate. The words that are phonologically similar will not be counted because it would be considered overlap in the vocabulary, so a child that speaks English and Spanish, dentist, and dentista would not be counted as 2 different vocabs but as one. The benefits of using the Peabody vocabulary test is that it's fast, it's easy that the parents can run it, and it will give us a nice individual baseline for how generation is affecting bilingual children's language development. The second part will be an English language proficiency test. It will test the child's listening and speaking skills in English, and this test will give us a bigger picture of which makes it easier to compare between the different generations. The first part will be measuring the accuracy and vocabulary size of each language, and this will help us see if different generations means different vocabulary sizes for each language. Parents will ask their children to identify the picture that matches the word they are saying, and they will put an X next to the item if they got it wrong, like the picture to the right shows. Then the percent correct will be calculated as shown in the table below, and that will be compared between the different groups. So the anticipated results for each group are that first generations will have smaller combined vocabulary, perform better in non-English portions, lower recall of English words. This is because they learn their home language first and are exposed to it more because it's the way they communicate with their parents. They are barely being exposed to English in kindergarten, so it might take them longer to associate the English word with the symbol, and they might default to using their home language. For both second and third generation, it is expected that they will demonstrate bigger combined vocabularies because they are exposed to both those languages at the same time. The only difference is that I expect third generation to have less of a difference between the percent correct of English words and their other language. This is how the results might look like. You have the 3 different groups and how they performed in English and their other language, and you can see that they follow the trends of the anticipated results. The second part will measure the English language levels of children from each generation. This will give us an insight to see if generation really does impact language development. It would be a score out of 6, and the resources are really accessible, so it's easy to recreate since schools use it to see the eligibility for bilingual services. Hoff had stated that not many bilinguals are on par in their English proficiency level with their monolingual peers, so I anticipate that first generation bilinguals will score lower in both listening and speaking, and second and third generation bilinguals will not face this issue and score higher because they are being exposed to English at home before starting school. And so this is how the results might look like for that. As you see, the task scores go higher with each generation. So how will this study help to better understand language development and help the field move forward? Well, the percent of immigrants that make up the US population is on the rise. Doing a study like this will help us look into the life of the children of those immigrants and then their children to see what other factors can contribute to their language development. As of now, most bilinguals in current studies are from low SES homes, but if we see that non-first generation bilinguals come from higher SES homes, we can then start using that as a new factor and see how that's affecting language development. The study can also help us improve ESL services in the schools by having a more holistic approach, so this means relying less on standardized test scores that are usually made by and for white upper class students, so that we can more fairly assess bilinguals and give them the resources that they need. The study can also help combat statistics like this one, that 31% of children who speak English but hear another language at home do not complete high school versus 10% of children who just speak English at home. If it is a generational difference that is impacting bilinguals' language development, how can we make sure it's not the first generations who are suffering? What resources can we give those households, those parents, and how can we improve schools to help them so that they're not behind? That's all I have. Thank you so much for listening to my research study, and here are my references. Thank you.